An art student in Ohio is a few weeks away from graduating and moving to Colorado. She is seemingly happy, vibrant, and well-liked by everyone. Then one day, nobody hears from her, and her family, friends, and her fiancé grow increasingly concerned. For a good 10 years, nothing happens as the case becomes colder and colder. Until, that is, her father pushes police to reopen the investigation. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Before we get started this week, I'd like to announce that my first Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps Presents limited series, 34 Fairview Road, The Murder of John O'Keefe, Karen Reed, Turtle Boy, and A Community Divided, is being released on October 17th. This series will not have any effect on my weekly Crossing the Line episodes. So every Tuesday night at midnight, expect a new episode of Crossing the Line, and every Thursday, beginning October 17th, an episode of 34 Fairview Road will drop. Making people laugh is a gift. To be able to meet someone, see them smile, and immediately feel the warmth that laughter can bring is no easy task. Not everyone possesses the charm and wit and talent to pull it off. 21-year-old Katelyn Markham is one of those people who will not only make you laugh, but in a crowded room make you feel as if you are the only person in that room. And in that regard, Katelyn's father says his daughter, as she grew, was a bright and vibrant woman coming out of her shell like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Katelyn has a serious side to her as well. And by early August 2011, Katelyn is a few weeks away from completing a graphic arts degree at the Art Institute of Ohio, Cincinnati. Katelyn lives in Fairfield, Butler County, Ohio. Fairfield is about 25 miles north of Cincinnati and houses some 45,000 people. And it might be best known today as being the home of comedian Tom Segura. In photographs, Katelyn is goofy and fun and always, and I mean always, smiling. And it's that quirky side to her all of those close to Katelyn adore. She brings this sort of positive, sunny energy wherever she goes. Someone who can make you feel, after first meeting her, as if you've known her all your life. By August 11, 2011, Katelyn is enjoying the notion of finishing her art degree and, in a few weeks, celebrating her 22nd birthday. She is also planning a major move out of state. She's even recently become engaged to a guy she's known for almost a decade, John Carter. They seem happy together, each bringing into the relationship his or her own oddness that kind of feeds off the other and works. Katelyn lives alone in what is a duplex on Dorshire Drive in Fairfield. John lives not far away in a 2-story single-family home on West Sciato Drive. It's a reasonably nice neighborhood and not necessarily known as a hub of crime or for any serious trouble of any kind. The house John Carter lives in is actually owned by his stepfather and mother, and they also live in the same house. John is 23, a kind of clunky, clumsy sort of chap, as my British friends might say, with a sullen, rough exterior. He and Katelyn have been engaged for about a year, but going out since Katelyn was 14. There is something they see in each other, despite the vastly different life paths they seem to be on. Because they live so close to each other, about 2 miles away, Katelyn and John spend a lot of time together, hanging out at each other's houses. On August 13th, John gets out of bed around 2:30 p.m., which is quite the norm for him. John works for Papa John's Pizza. He goes in at his scheduled shift that day, 5 p.m., but is quickly sent home near 6 p.m. because it's been such a slow night. For the past year or so, Katelyn and John have been planning a move to Colorado. It's something both are very much looking forward to. Kind of a change of scenery and pace. In preparation for the move, John needs to put a trailer hitch on the back of his vehicle so he can tow a trailer with all of their possessions. So he calls a friend of his, Jonathan Markham, to come over to the house and help him. After they finish installing the trailer hitch, John tells his friend they're heading over to Katelyn's to talk about the trip, hang out, and just kind of get pumped up for the move. Katelyn is at work herself, a place called Dave's Bridal. John Carter and Jonathan Markham show up at Katelyn's about 7:15 p.m., and she is already home. So they all sit around, talk, and laugh. John Carter and Jonathan Markham smoke some weed and decide around 10:45 p.m. it's time to get going. John isn't staying over Katelyn's on this night, but he never says why. But he does hang around for about a half hour after Jonathan Markham takes off. Somewhere near 11:30 p.m., John gets up to leave. Katelyn asks him about burning a bag of financial documents she has been collecting. It's something John has been promising her he'd take care of for some time, but because he is lazy, he's put it off. Katelyn hands him the bag. He says he'll do it soon. John then kisses his fiancée goodbye and leaves. Katelyn mentions that she's going directly to bed. John Carter drives away. But he doesn't go home. He instead heads out to a party at one of his and Katelyn's mutual friends in Hamilton, a neighboring town not too far away. He stays at the party until about 2 a.m., heads home, stays up for most of the night, and wakes up the next day at 4:30 p.m. to get ready for his 5 p.m. shift at Papa John's. Again, not the most ambitious dude, but he and Katelyn are moving soon. So what's the point right now of changing anything? John says later that he starts calling Katelyn when he gets up, but is unable to reach her. So at 6:30 p.m., after still not speaking to her or getting a text from Katelyn, he asks his boss if he can leave work to drive over to Katelyn's and check on her. As he pulls in, John Carter sees Katelyn's car parked in its usual spot. He gets out of his car and walks to the back door. If her car is there, why isn't Katelyn answering her phone? It's kind of weird. Katelyn has a habit of always putting Murphy, her dog, in the bathroom when she leaves. John notices as he walks in that Murphy is roaming around the apartment, which is kind of a comfort in one way because it tells him that Katelyn is most likely home. But he cannot find her upon first entering. So he goes up the stairs and into her bedroom. Her purse and wallet are there, but Katelyn is nowhere to be found. He calls Katelyn's family and a few friends, and no one has seen or heard from her. Several family members tell John they'll be right over. He, on the other hand, leaves to drive back to Papa John's to, he later says, drop off the money he'd collected from several deliveries that day. Then leaves right away and heads back to Katelyn's, where he calls 911 to report her missing. Look, I think going back to work to drop off money before calling 911 would be the last thing on my mind. But that's just me. People respond to these situations differently. Maybe John is thinking Katelyn went out for a walk. Who knows? When he gets back to Katelyn's place, John Carter finds her keys inside her purse and goes out to her car to check if her cell phone is inside. According to John, it's not there. Police arrive and begin asking questions. There's an indication that Katelyn could have been missing by this time for about 20 hours. The last time John says he saw her was the previous night when he kissed her goodbye and promised to burn those financial documents she was so concerned about having destroyed. Katelyn's family is stunned, obviously, upset, worried. Where in the heck could she be? Without her keys, purse, wallet? Makes zero sense. Also, nobody dislikes Katelyn, so the thought of something nefarious going on is far from the minds of anyone at this point. There has to be an explanation. It's hard to believe that somebody would have harmed her, Katelyn's dad later tells reporters, recalling this exact moment. So everyone involved is now searching for Katelyn in places they think she might possibly have gone. By now they know she never showed up for work at the bridal shop that day. So there's even more of an indication that she's been missing for close to 24 hours without her wallet or vehicle. None of her friends have picked her up. No one from her family did either. John is then asked to come down to the Fairfield Police Department and fill out a formal missing person report and give them as much information as he can. There has to be an answer, police are thinking. Katelyn gave no indication whatsoever that she was upset or needed to check out for a while and be alone or any other reason for leaving. In fact, quite the opposite. She is hyper-focused on finishing school. She would never duck out on the final few weeks of class after working so hard for so long. So John Carter gets comfortable. A few officers sit in front of him. I mean, let's be real here. If you and I are cops in this situation, we are suspicious of this dude, John Carter, from the get-go. Am I right? You'd have to be. He comes across as a loser, a dude who doesn't seem all that concerned about his fiancée. And one of the first things police notice on John Carter as they are sizing him up are several fresh, vertical scratches on the left side of his neck. That's quite interesting. How did that happen? One officer asks. Oh, John Carter says, those? My electric razor. We're going to need to photograph those. Are you good with that? John pauses, looks at both of the detectives. Sure, he says. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Let's take our first break here and come right back. A week goes by and nobody has heard from Katelyn Markham. You know how this goes. Family and friends make flyers and knock on doors. Police search all the local places a young woman like Katelyn might take off to. Investigators talk to sources and question some of the usual dirtbags around town to see if they know anything. This, while silently working under the understanding that those scratches on John Carter's neck pose a big problem. Cutting yourself shaving is one thing. Digging into your skin several times with an electric razor, well, that's quite another. Not to mention that John was the last person to see, speak to, and, come to find out, text Katelyn. By August 23rd, police are able to convince Jonathan Markham, John Carter's buddy there on that last night Katelyn was seen, to come into the station and talk about that night he and John went over to Katelyn's and hung out after putting that trailer hitch on John's vehicle. Jonathan Markham says he knew Katelyn because they used to work together at Panera Bread. They asked Jonathan to go through that night he and John Carter last saw her. Jonathan says they arrived at her apartment and all of them smoked some weed, and then they talked about Katelyn and John's move to Colorado. He says Katelyn seemed distracted. She was working on her laptop and kind of just sat in the same spot on the couch without moving for most of the night. She also seemed distant and not her bubbly self, Jonathan adds. So, for the most part, this story is very similar to what John Carter has told police, though some of the minor details are off. Let me ask you, one investigator says to Jonathan Markham. You recall seeing any scratch marks on John's neck that day or night? Jonathan thinks about it. Actually, no, I don't, he says. So where now does law enforcement go from here? There really are not a lot of options left. In fact, years go by with no movement in the case. They have no forensic evidence, no witnesses other than John Carter and Jonathan Markham. Katelyn seems to have disappeared from her life with no explanation whatsoever. Those scratches are interesting, but unless John Carter is forthcoming and wants to talk about everything, they cannot make him at this point. Then on April 7th, 2013, all that changes. About 35 feet off Big Cedar Road in Cedar Grove, Indiana, about a half-hour's drive south of Fairfield, someone is walking along a heavily wooded, rural area near a creek bed. There's brush and trees and thickly settled bushes all around. Yet the leaves are not yet out, so the hiker can kind of see through everything easily. And wouldn't you know, down along the creek bed, the hiker sees what appears to be a body wrapped in black plastic. The type of heavy plastic you'd find on, say, a construction site, with what appears to be the skull of the body wrapped separately in discolored plastic shopping bags. After an autopsy, the body is identified as Katelyn Markham. But the medical examiner cannot determine an exact cause of death because of severe decomposition. Katelyn's death is ruled a homicide, and it's clear from an entomologist's assessment that she died during the second or third week of August 2011, close to the time of her disappearance. John Carter, who has been the one and only suspect all along, becomes the target once again after Dave Markham, Katelyn's father, puts pressure on the Butler County Sheriff's Office to reopen the case. Why? Because it's been 2 years since they found Katelyn's body. So John Carter is asked to come in and chat about her disappearance. That night specifically. Since that time, law enforcement has developed a lot of new evidence, and they believe the guy has had something to do with Katelyn's murder. And yet, every time they seem to get close to John Carter, their case fizzles. In February 2015, John Carter suddenly decides to add new details to his previous account. And the details John gives up now, 4 years later, raise some eyebrows. John Carter has a big problem. His father owns property near the location where Katelyn's body was found, and he and Katelyn, along with other friends, often camped out in the same general area. He now says that on the night Katelyn disappeared, when she mentioned those documents she needed burned, John had grabbed the bag out of her hand, telling her he would do it right away. When he did this, he says, Katelyn became a little huffy. He then adds, she said, "I love you," very sarcastically, and so he kissed her, and then he left. After he was driving away that night, he now says that Katelyn texted him a photo of her all dressed up and ready to go out, kind of as if taunting him, like she was pissed. Investigators then realize why John Carter came forward, to set up this idea that Katelyn was going out. By this stage of the investigation, police now have John and Katelyn's cell phone records, so they know a lot more about both of their movements on that night. Those records back up John Carter's story of texting her, and also a picture being sent from Katelyn's cell phone to his. They also discover that John Carter had deleted several text messages between his and Katelyn's phone throughout that night. But the times are strange. 7:53 p.m. to 11:36 p.m., a time period John and his buddy Jonathan Palmerton claim they were with Katelyn. Then, at 12:06 a.m., Katelyn's cell phone goes dark. Either it was shut off, the battery died, or it was put in airplane mode, or the SIM card was removed. They asked John about deleting those texts. He says he accidentally deleted them. We all accidentally delete texts now and again. Right, John Carter? You said you sent Katelyn a good morning text at 4 a.m. that following morning, they tell John. More as a statement of fact rather than a question. John doesn't answer. You see, there's no record of that text ever being sent. You know what I always say. Generally, in murder investigations, the obvious, simplest answer is 9 out of 10 times the right answer. And there are no coincidences in murder, only facts and evidence. So John is asked to take a polygraph. Well, he fails that lie detector test horribly. It's pretty damn clear that John Carter knows more than he has been sharing with law enforcement. Then some rather interesting information is obtained by the FBI. The FBI had been brought in to help with the case after Katelyn's body was recovered. The FBI does a computer forensic search of John Carter's home computer. It shows that John Carter watched several episodes of a series called White Collar before heading off to several porn sites during that night after he left Katelyn's. White Collar is your basic cookie-cutter crime drama, police procedural, focusing on a con artist, forger, and thief, who is also an FBI informant. The interesting bit of information the FBI then finds on John's computer relates to 2 specific episodes of White Collar. After enjoying a bit of porn, John began searching and landing on a few sites with the plot summaries of the series. And he read through those summaries, specifically Season 2 of White Collar, episodes 13 and 14. And wouldn't you know, those episodes deal with the murder of a woman with 2 men involved. Then another piece of information, which does not look good for John Carter. In the days before her disappearance, Katelyn and John Carter's mom went to the bank so Katelyn could apply for a credit card John's mom was co-signing. The bank employee recalls an odd exchange between the two as they were filling out the paperwork. "I'll co-sign," John Carter's mother reportedly told Katelyn, "but you've got to take my son to Colorado with you, so I guess you're stuck now." And then she laughs. To which Katelyn responded by not laughing or smiling, but actually sneering. Katelyn then returned to the bank alone in the days that followed and told the bank she wanted to withdraw the application because it was never her idea to begin with. Let's take our final break here. Come right back. It always shocks me in this day and age what suspects in murder cases leave behind or fail to get rid of after committing such horrible acts of violence. But then again, most murderers are stupid. They don't plan much beyond scant details of the murder itself. Several writings were found in a binder inside John's parents' house where he lived in the basement, like some sort of troll under a bridge, during the time in question. Many of the writings were even signed by John Carter. Notably, the writings law enforcement are interested in depict a, quote, conflict and demon within John Carter and himself. And let me just quote now from those writings. Deep down, I love her. You ought to kill her. But I love her. She must die. I can't kill her. Yes, you can. No. Yes. How do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good. But you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right. About what? Nothing. I slit your wrists with the key to your heart. Quite the narrative prose there, John Carter. A conflict within himself, I'll say. Am I right? The first arrest in Katelyn's murder comes in February 2023, when Jonathan Palmerton, 35 years old at the time, is charged with perjury for allegedly lying in connection with the sheriff's investigation. Smart move on the prosecutor's part. They know John Carter is not smart enough to commit the murder and then get rid of the body by himself. And they realize the likely co-conspirator is Jonathan Palmerton. So what you do is you get John charged with whatever you can, and then you question him under the banner of a murder charge forthcoming, thus cracking him easily. In March 2023, John Carter, at the age of 34, is indicted for the murder of Katelyn Markham. He is arrested while teaching a glass-blowing class where he had been working for years. Glass-blowing. John's mother comes out and says he is definitely not guilty. Not quite the glowing endorsement you'd want to hear from your mom, I reckon, but the family does come up with his $1 million bond, and John Carter is bonded out of jail. Ultimately, John Carter is charged with 2 counts of murder, and in July 2024, he pleads out his case to involuntary manslaughter, which I feel is a travesty of justice. But then again, the prosecution believed all it had was a largely circumstantial case against John Carter. So I guess you kind of cut your losses and take what you can get, which in this case, as you'll soon hear, is a huge disappointment. In court, before John Carter's sentencing, Dave Markham reads a statement, which in part says, "Not a day goes by that I don't think of Katelyn. Let him feel the pain that many of us have endured for the past 13 years. The maximum sentence Carter could have received was 3 years, so the judge's hands were tied here by the law. The dude has shown zero remorse, nor has he ever said why or how he murdered Katelyn. That's it for this week. Tell someone in your life you love them. Let them know how important they are to you. I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. And log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. We are just a few weeks away now from the launch of my first narrative podcast under the Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps Presents brand. 34 Fairview Road, a 10-part limited series about the Karen Reed, John O'Keefe case in Massachusetts. So look for it soon wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And for all my Paper Ghost fans and listeners, I am working on season 5 which will drop next year from iHeartMedia. I do so much appreciate all of your interest in my work and never take any of this for granted. And I want to thank those of you sending in cases for me to cover on Crossing the Line. I appreciate it. I do look into each one to see if it's a good fit. As always, be safe, be aware. Sources for this week's episode include a 29-page search warrant, State of Ohio versus Investigation into John Carter. Journal News, Katelyn Markham case, a timeline of events, by Journal News staff, August 1st, 2023. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinas, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.